you can be a total screw up, and all it takes is like one kind of inflection point to change the trajectory that you're on, and how you get to that inflection point is a great mystery, but it's very possible. Like it happened to me. So,
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we talked to Will from Fantasy Spin. We learned about how early on in his collegiate years, he was focused mainly on advertising and marketing, how that shifted into the fantasy sports space, and where he is today. Let's go ahead and hop into our conversation with him now. Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and on this episode, we are joined from Will of Fantasy Spin. Now, for people that may not know you by name or face, a quick 10 to 15 second high-level overview. Where are you right now in 2025?
so right now in 2025, I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, working from home, building the Fantasy Spin app and helping with volunteer work for the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association.
All right, easy enough. How I always like starting these off is for you to tap into your memory banks as far as your memory allows. Go as far back to the very, very first thing that you can remember wanting to be or wanting to do when you grew up, and then roughly the age you were at that point.
Yeah, so I remember the first thing I ever wanted to be was a football player. Um, Growing up, it was my favorite sport to play, and gosh, that was like second or third grade. I was like, wow, I'm gonna be in the NFL one day. So that's the earliest memory I have of what I wanted to be when I grew up.
And so did that just come from a passion of playing, or the what you were doing at the time, or the team you were on? Were you like one of the best players where you actually had oh, I'm better than the average person, maybe I can do something with that? Or is it just, I just want to be on TV playing on Sundays?
The latter. Yeah, I was never good enough to like warrant any you know, um reason to believe that I could make it to the NFL. I was never like that. But I just loved it. I loved playing football. And so that was always my dream, until I got to around like maybe seventh or eighth grade and I was like, oh, I'm not good enough for this.
And then did it just become not a goal or a fantasy in seventh or eighth grade, or did you actually have something else around that time? You're like, okay, this isn't it because this is something that's much more likely based on my skill set.
It was really due to the fact that I got too many concussions and I had to stop playing football.
Hold on. So we are seventh, eighth grade, and you're already lit up with multiple concussions by that point.
Yep.
Good old youth tackle football.
Yep.
I think so were they like doctor diagnosed concussions?
Yes.
I believe so. I played football throughout high school, and it wasn't doctor diagnosed, which I probably should have been. Probably should have went to the doctor, but I did have in practice, and I wasn't even in a game. Just tackling our star running back in practice was helmet to helmet, and I want to know if you can remember kind of what your eyes or your brain was doing at the time, if you can go back that far. But I remember this crazy impact. The inside of the helmet, the cheek pad, I guess, like flew out. I remember that part. And then I took my helmet off because I knew I was dazed. And I looked in the sky, and it was still like daytime, so it should have been a sunny blue sky. And it was green with squiggly lines through it. And I'm just like, something bad just happened.
Yeah.
So having multiple is crazy, especially at that young age. But like, do you remember anything about like that experience, like in the moment, what you were seeing or feeling?
Yeah, the problem was I don't remember what I was seeing or what I was feeling.
That checks out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just remember going to, the ER and just because like, symptoms were expressing themselves, namely dizziness, seeing stars, not seeing anything. And yeah, so just, went to the doctors and they're like, "Hey, buddy, it's probably time to hang it up."
Yeah.
I
It's
said, "All right,
crazy.
doc, you got it."
I feel like not. I mean, if it's tackle football, it's tackle football. People still run at full speed regardless of their size and their age, and I just feel like that's something that not a lot of people think about because they think about, oh, NFL, like people are so much bigger, stronger, and faster. That's where concussions happen. But yeah, it's. I mean, hard hit to the head, regardless of how big or strong you are, always is gonna result in something negative happening more often than not.
Yeah.
So you get to that point, doctors, family, probably your team and coach are like, three or four concussions is enough.
Mhm.
Probably not do this anymore. So we're now approaching like the first year of high school, roughly in this chronological timeline. Going into high school, did you have anything that was goal oriented that is actually something that was, oh, if I go to school for this in college, I have this degree? Was there anything that was more accurately mapped to what you could possibly be?
No, so I didn't have any like sort of North Star, if you want to think of it that way, Travis. I had at that point, seventh, eighth grade, I really got into cooking. I watched Food Network every day. I love to cook. And so I was like, I'm gonna become a chef. That's what I'm gonna do. And so me and my friends, we talked about like, just loosely opening up a restaurant, calling it Spanky's, having each corner of the restaurant offering a different type of cuisine. That was our
Huh.
goal. So that's still my grand plan for later on down the road in life. But no, seventh, eighth grade, early on in high school, I had zero direction. Like just wandering in space, not sure what I wanted to do with my life. Just trying to stay out of trouble. Really, that was my only objective.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of parallels I have here. So how well, you said you're watching the Food Network a lot. Was there a particular show that stood out that you're like, oh man, like I would love to do this for a living?
The Barefoot Contessa.
I'm trying to what roughly what year was this? Because I don't know if I remember that one. Because I watched Food Network a
Oh
lot growing
man,
up too.
Ina Garden's been on the TV for a long time now. But yeah, this was so I was in seventh grade in 2007.
Okay.
So it was around that time.
I forget how much younger than me you are now. I feel like grandpa. But no, so for me, I I feel like your passion for wanting to do something in the culinary field was probably a lot stronger than mine. But growing up, watching Food Network religiously, Emeril Lagasse, Emeril's Live was
Uh-huh.
like because this was high school, so I'm already performing, I'm doing plays, I'm doing the theatrical stuff, and then seeing like I can be on TV being an entertainer, but also cook, which seems so fun to me to try all these different things. So you kind of watching the show, thinking about all these different ideas with your friends, was there any actual literal step to that plan? Or was it like I have this idea and then the next day it's like, yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it was never like a serious enough thing to where I applied to culinary school. I looked into it. I know where the Culinary Institute of America is because I did some research, but never enough conviction to like go that route. I when I floated this idea to people, they always said, "Oh man, like yeah, the restaurant business is really tough, all these things," and so kind of dissuaded me from going in that direction because I was like, just not. I didn't have like the drive to want to like do it commercially, cooking. It's always been like a passion, and then it never really materialized into a profession. Honestly, just because people around me were saying, "Hey, this is a really tough gig. Like, you should not do this." And I was like, "Okay,
Easy enough. If one person says no, okay, that makes sense. So,
yeah."
we're starting back with the football career, and now with the interest in cooking. What was the first thing? So we're still kind of hovering around the high school years. What was the first thing that actually did have conviction in that you did make at least one stride or one step in that path?
So it took until college, you know. Do you want to jump ahead to there?
Well, yeah. So I mean, essentially, so again, I know that I've known you for the longest time, and the reason why I love this show so much and love this podcast because even though there's people that I've known for years, 5, 10 years, it's always interesting to learn about things that I've never known about them before, but also to
Hmm.
kind of see the parallels. Like, wow, there's so much similarities in the same kind of thought process we had, and so from my understanding, you said early on that you didn't really have guidance. And I've mentioned this in a few of my previous episodes where the fact that somebody at my high school was getting paid, literally paid real money to have the title of guidance counselor. And I never even met this person once in 4 years. I feel like they failed at their job. But going into college, well, actually graduating high school, I didn't even have I graduated high school without even applying to a college because I had no idea what I wanted to do because of kind of that lack of guidance of what is possible. Is that kind of what you're saying here of where you knew that you wanted a furthering educational part of your life, which is why you went to college? Did you just go to college without any defined degree? Was it kind of like a gen ed kind of knock out those while you figure it out?
Yeah, so I went to community college my first 2 years. I went to Raritan Valley Community College in New Jersey. And this was simply due to the fact, Travis, that I could not get in anywhere. I was a horrible student growing up. I can't underline the word horrible enough. Like I was getting in so much trouble. My grades were awful. It just wasn't for me, you know. Um, so I didn't have a choice but to but to go to junior college and try and figure it out. So yeah, I was taking various classes there, just trying to see what I was interested in, and so no direction, really no direction until I took some classes in college that like sort of interest me more.
Do you think that your poor grades was more associated to like a literal educational development thing, or was it more along the lines of like complete disinterest where you're not applying yourself to try to get those straight A's? It's just like, hey, what's the bare minimum I need to not take this school year over again?
Yeah, the latter for sure. And many times I did have to take the school year over again. I had to go to summer school for math twice. So I didn't like, yeah, it just wasn't, I don't know. I don't want to like try and self-diagnose like why I got bad grades because ultimately it just comes down to me not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not caring enough. Why I didn't care enough or try hard enough, I don't really know the answer to that. But fact of the matter is I didn't do my job as a student, and therefore I didn't have like as many options to go to college as most people do.
So now you're in, yeah, I believe you said what was a junior college you went to, taking the gen ed stuff,
Mhm.
knowing that, or hoping anyway, that at some point during these few years here, that something's going to click. You're going to find some passion in something, and then okay, this is the degree that I want to seek. So now, how long into that post high school collegiate experience did it take before you were exposed to something that's like, ha, light bulb click. This is it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, so it took until I took a marketing class with my one professor, Mike Jones Kelly, and this was now at the time I had transferred to St. Bonaventure University, and it was a class I had taken with him. And it was stimulating and interesting where every other class I was taking at the time certainly wasn't, you know. I was interested in history. I've always been interested in like history and things like that, but I never saw a path to a profession there. But then Mike Jones Kelly came along, introduced me to advertising, and I was like, holy shit, this is, sorry, can I curse? Sorry, you
Well,
can
you
edit that
can
out.
now, Will.
Sorry. Sorry.
All of my
Um,
7-year-old viewers just logged off.
sorry, kids. Yeah, no, I was just really interested in advertising. I found it very interesting, sort of the psychology around it. I appreciated the fact that I could scratch a creative itch, whether it was copywriting or actually, visually developing advertisements. Like that was interesting to me, and so I joined what is called the American Advertising Federation. It's a club that Professor Mike Jones Kelly had at St. Bonaventure, and what that club did was do actual advertising work for small businesses that are in the local community. And then we also participated in a national advertising competition, if you will. So that was super interesting to me, super stimulating. I did everything from copywriting to running the actual agency my senior year of college. And that's when I sort of like figured out, okay, I really enjoy advertising and marketing. And so that's sort of when I had the conviction to sort of pursue this thing as a career. And so that's the point at which that happened for me. It was like my junior, senior year of college, where I was like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do.
I'm intrigued because I don't think I've ever heard of a national advertising competition. So kind of see spell that out for me a little bit on how that works? And then are you just judged by the elite people in that industry where they just kind of look over things? Is it actually based on like a result oriented, oh, you got this many people to click or to sign up or whatever it may be? How does that work in a nutshell?
Yeah, it's all subjective, no results based or performance based, winners. So how it works is every school that participates in this gets a brief, right, from a real company. So my first year, we had a brief from Snapple, to basically do X, Y, and Z. And so what we would do is get the brief, and then we would develop a fully integrated marketing campaign plan for accomplishing whatever goals Snapple sent out for us. And then we would put it into a deck, if you will. And then we would go and present that in New York to a panelist of judges, like a representative from Snapple, another person who works at an ad agency, various people, and then they would basically just like select whichever one they like the best.
Easy enough. So
Mhm.
was that is that like a every school that has a program like that or a degree program anyway are all competing at the same level against each other?
Yeah, yeah, it's regional, so we competed against like Syracuse, a few other schools like in that area. So and then if you win your region, you go on to the national competition or whatever. We did not win our region, but so we just stayed there in New York, but that's kind of how it works.
So now we're junior senior year of college at St. Bon, and what did you finish it? Did you finish the college degree, and what was the kind of the title that it merged into? Like, what does your degree say? I guess your piece of paper, if you will.
Absolutely. Let me pull it down for you, Travis. One second. Hold on.
He's just gonna run into the other room now, run down the stairs, run up the stairs, take something off the wall, realize you accidentally glued it to the wall, so now there's a hole in the wall.
All right, so this is my degree. I'm very proud of it. So you can see, I don't know if it says the actual degree, but basically, I was a strategic communications and digital media major.
A lot of fancy words there.
A lot of fancy words to basically just say communications, yeah. But I will sort of take a moment to reflect here on kind of this part of my arc, if you want to call it that, because again, like I said earlier, I was a tremendously awful student growing up. Um, and kind of a light bulb went off once I got to community college. I was like, okay, I need to start doing stuff for me now. Like every time I would try to get good grades growing up, it was simply so that my parents wouldn't yell at me. And then the light bulb kind of went off when I was in college. I was like, okay, I have to start doing this for myself. Like this is my life. And something kind of switched. And I was really proud of the fact that I graduated from St. Bonaventure and I was named the most outstanding student at the Jandoli School of Communications. So I don't know that I'm trying to brag really, but just sort of trying to say, I guess, that, you can be a total screw up and all it takes is like one kind of inflection point to change the trajectory that you're on, and how you get to that inflection point is a great mystery, but it's very possible. Like it happened to me. So,
So I know you were mentioning that like you ran the agency your senior year and you did all these things. Like you mentioned Snapple, a massive brand that you were working on stuff with. So did you essentially have your first marketing slash advertising gig lined up even prior to graduation day because you had so much exposure into it? Or if not, how long did that happen before that came to be?
yeah, absolutely. So, like nearly every college grad, I did not have anything lined up, which is, um, yeah, it's crazy. Sort of crazy to think about because, like, here I am having a pretty baller resume coming out of school, or at least what I thought was a baller resume. No shortage of connections. And yeah, it just didn't work out. So the first thing I did out of college was I worked in Princeton and Trenton, New Jersey, which is kind of where I'm from. And we basically got a job working for my cousin. What we would do is we would go around Princeton and Trenton and collect scrap metal and then go to the Trenton scrap yard and give them our metal and get money. That's what I did for my first sort of like job out of college, was just go around and lug a bunch of metal around and bring it to the scrapyard and make some dough. So like, yeah, I didn't have, a job lined up at this prestigious advertising agency or what have you. So very much so was still trying to figure it out once I left college.
So for the scrap metal part of your life, I believe if I'm doing my math correctly, we're about like what 2011-ish. Is that about
No, 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 no. No, this was 2017.
okay? So what year did you graduate St. Bon?
2017.
Oh man, I'm trying to go back. Like, wait a second. You're talking about. I think where my wires were crossed is I think you were referencing the 7 to 8 year old year, and for some reason I put that into high school year. I guess I keep forgetting our
Really easy
the
way to think about it,
yeah.
Travis, was in 2012, I graduated 12th grade, and in 2002, I graduated second grade.
Oh, that's
You know,
easy then. You have the
yeah.
easy gig. Okay, so yeah, I'm a little sloshed around on the chronological timeline. So now we're here in 2017. You graduated. You didn't have anything lined up. You're doing what you can to pay the bills, and now how long does this period of your life last before you either find something that is degree related
Mhm.
or something that's beyond the collection metal collection stuff?
Yeah, so I got my first job in the industry, if you want to call it that, in September of 2017. So it was May, June, July, August that I was sort of trying to figure it out.
And this is still 2017.
Hmm.
So what was that first, I guess I don't want to call it real opportunity, but
Yeah,
degree oriented opportunity?
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, so I worked for a husband and a wife, Susan and Dill Driscoll. Um, Susan and Dill, I actually have their book right here. It's called Take Charge. You can read it. It's on Amazon. It's a great book. So Susu and Dill started a bunch of advertising agencies doing experiential marketing, right? If you've ever heard of the FIFA World Cup Trophy Tour or the Coca-Cola Olympic Torch Relay, Live 8, like all of these big global events, like they put them on. And so, long story short, they had sold their most recent agency called Ignition to a holding company called Havas in 2012. And then they had a 5-year non-compete clause, right? And once their 5-year non-compete was over, they wanted to do more events because that's what they're passionate about. And they took up a brief with the World Scout Jamboree, which is run by the World Organization of the Scouting Movement. It's held every 4 years. It's a tremendous event with hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world collecting to, do all the fun scouting activities that you do. And so they needed basically somebody who was younger to uh, manage the digital side of this campaign. And through a couple of connections, I met these folks and they liked what I was about and hired me. So I worked for Susan and Dill up in Lake Placid, New York. That's where they were based out of. So did that. That was my first kind of foray into the marketing and advertising industry, like properly, like as an actual employee, somebody who's being paid to do this, a professional. So that's sort of the chronological timeline. Started in September of 2017.
So were you well aware of these individuals? Like, did you read the book? Did you know everything that they were about prior to getting this opportunity? Or is it kind of, oh, here's an opportunity, and then you kind of learn as you go, like, holy crap, these guys are like big timers in this global space?
No, I fully was fully aware. Yeah, fully aware of who they were. That's why I tried my ass off during the interview and like really made sure I did a really good job with everything to get the job because I knew like it was such a great
Right.
opportunity and thankfully it worked out.
So if we get hired in the fall of 2017, how long does this relationship with them last roughly?
Yeah, so I think it was I stopped working there in golly, it was a 3-year thing, 3-year stint. So it was 2017, 2018, 2019, and then I stopped in December of 2019.
Well, it's an interesting timeline because that's roughly 3-ish months before the world shuts down. Do you think that if you were, do you think I don't know. I'm always interested about other industries, if you were still working with them with the world shutting down, how much do you think that would have skewed your I guess your job, your responsibilities in
Hmm.
that field? If because I mean at that point with when COVID hit, I was already knee deep into the sports side of things, the fantasy sports and sports betting. So I'm curious,
Hmm.
if you were still working with them, how do you think that would have affected that role?
Well, I can tell you that once, so basically, I stopped working there because they were ready to retire more and start taking on fewer projects. And they were like, "Hey, Will, you got to go spread your wings a little bit. Go work somewhere pretty sweet." So, um, I ended up getting a job at a wonderful experiential marketing agency called Red Peg, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of DC. And so I started working there in January of 2020. Started working there in January of 2020. This is an event marketing company, right? They went around and they put on events for brands like Yingling, right? Brands like the Virginia Lottery, Geico, you know. Um, so what I can tell you is that once the world shut down, my job got eliminated because we were an experiential marketing agency. It was a relatively new hire, doing sort of a non um, like a nice to have job. I was basically doing account and executive management. So it wasn't necessarily like a role that needed to be had. So they cut me in April of 2020. So that's kind of how it affected me.
Well, yeah, definitely the events side of thing, or the live in person stuff. I mean, that makes, yeah, absolute sense. So, I'm trying to while I'm we're learning about this timeline. While I'm learning about your timeline, I'm trying to kind of recall when you and I crossed paths for the first time, and I feel like it was this maybe I don't know if it was like 2021, 22, but it's had to been at least 3 years from now. So
Hmm.
when this job gets eliminated, because of course
Hmm.
event marketing, live in person stuff doesn't make sense if the world's not moving. Did you during this time you're like, holy crap, I don't have a job now. What's going to happen? The world's in chaos. Was your brain going towards I need to go to something else that's more COVID deterrent, or something that's not something that I can get fired because the world shuts down? Or were you still kind of okay? What's the next opportunity in this space? What were you doing when you got let go there?
Yeah. So it was April 8th, 2020. And honestly, I was like at that time, I was just working and playing Warzone with my buddies. Like that was my life, because I was in New Jersey at the time. Like, it was very touch and go in that part of the world at that moment. So I had no effing clue like what to do. It was just as you remember, very weird time. So I'm thinking about it, I'm telling my friends, I'm talking to my friends like, hey, I got let go, blah, blah, blah. And lo and behold, my one friend from college, Pat Milkovich, was working at a golf course in Cleveland, Ohio called Canterbury. Outstanding, outstanding club, hosts of many, many, many major championships over the years. Actually, is where Jack Nicklaus broke Bobby Jones's record for the most major wins at the 1974 PGA Championship. Was at Canterbury. And Pat was one of the professionals there. And he said, "Hey, Will, we need somebody to work in the golf shop as one of the professionals, but really focus on the marketing and merchandising sales of the golf shop." And I said, "You know what, man? That sounds freaking sweet. What does it pay?" And he was like, "Not much." And I was like, "Okay, that doesn't matter." He was like, "You can play golf every day if you want." And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Sign me up." Like the world might be over in a year and a half. Golf has always been a major passion of mine. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe there's a future for me in the golf industry. And so I jumped on that and moved out to Cleveland in May of 2020 and worked at Canterbury for 2 seasons. So that's kind of my arc there.
Were you there during any of the actual championships that were held there?
No, I was there 20 summer, so May 2020 through, well, I left and moved here in May. But no, I don't think I was there for any championships.
So you're Northeast focused, you're marketing, advertising focused. You're let go from job. World shuts down. college friend says, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you." You then ship your entire life over to Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
Is I mean, is that right? Like
Yeah.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So
100%.
so you get to Cleveland, you work there for when you say 2 seasons, I can only assume that means 2 years.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at 2022, which I feel like this is where we cross paths. So I don't want to like ask you when and where we met. I kind of want to experience it as you're going through the timeline. Like, and then I ran into
Yeah.
Travis.
Yeah.
But so did you stop after 2 seasons because of like the job that it was, the low pay, the anything, any possible negative connotation to it, or is it just like this isn't what I want to do?
I stopped working there because of I went full time on Better Fantasy.
So I guess let's rewind a little bit.
Yep.
When, so Better Fantasy, when was that first a brain baby? That's before you went to Cleveland.
No. So it became a brain baby in August of 2020. So it was after our fantasy football draft. That's kind of when the idea sprung. So August of 2020, we did our like sort of Excel sheet proof of concept, and then later that month we did our like sort of web view MVP, if you want to think of it that way. Um, and then September of 2021, we launched our app, and then a few months later, I quit my job at the golf course to do the Better Fantasy thing full time.
So when you're using the term we, who were the initial people that was part of that first brain baby, and then how, unless there was like more college friends, how did that kind of come to be? Like, how did you meet them?
So it's my best friends from growing up. We've been in the same fantasy league together since like fifth grade. And it was after our drafts. Uh, my co-founder, business partner, one of my best friends, Sahil Patel, and I were sitting in my driveway, and we were just talking about doing this thing. That's kind of how it started.
So you take your life to Cleveland, Ohio. Within seems like just a few months, you're having this conversation and with your childhood friend.
Mhm.
Becomes a brain baby. You start putting things on paper. So I believe, I guess what was the timeline from brain baby sitting in the car in the driveway chit chatting to launching version 1.0? How long did that take?
Couple weeks.
Man, did who was Sahil the developer behind it, or did you have somebody else kind of crunching those codes?
No, we just did an Excel sheet, like I said.
Okay,
Yeah, so we just did this on an Excel sheet. And if you remember, Travis, the core concept was like you could bet on your fantasy league's matchups,
right.
right? So we would just manually add in everybody's matchups and then ascribe point totals and spreads to each matchup, and then sort of just manually pass the board around to people and say, hey, like, who are you? Like, make a pick for each matchup, and then whoever gets the most picks right wins a gift. Like we're going to sponsor a gift card, and we gave whoever won like 20 bucks, you know what I mean, or whatever. And so that was version one. That was like the proof of concept. And so we did it with our fantasy league, and then we kind of spread it out to a couple other fantasy leagues like that weren't necessarily part of our friend group. And once we saw there was interest in other fantasy leagues like that, we didn't necessarily like prime this to, because um, we wanted to make sure that like our friends weren't just like interested because it was us. You know what I mean? So like we
Yeah.
presented it to a few other fantasy leagues and they were interested. Um, and then we put it on a web page, like I was saying, and just did it through a Fiverr, freelancer who just put it on a basic web HTML for us. Um, and then once that had enough traction, this was like September. That's when we were like, okay, this might be something we actually want to pursue. Like enough people are interested in this that we actually want to pursue it. So that was sort of like the jumping off point for the incorporation of the company and things like that.
So if I'm recalling this correctly, you from the XL inception to when you officially left the golf club, there's
Mhm.
roughly still almost 2 full years or 1.5 years there of you okay, this is what we want to do, but of course I still need to, pay the bills while we're building this out. and then it
Hmm.
just gets to an inflection point or an arc, like you mentioned earlier, where it gets okay. This is something that I want to do 100% full time. This is the time that it needs from me to be able to grow. I need to leave this golf club that I've been working at for 2 years. What
Hmm.
was the what was the caveat, or what was the golden nugget that like the light bulb moment where you go, if I quit this job that's paying my bills, I know, giving this 100% focus, that this is going to, explode to a point where it makes sense for me to leave this job. Like, what was happening with it where you're like, oh, I need to go full time, like right now?
Yeah, investor interest. That was really it. So we started raising money on a safe, and enough people were interested that we started getting enough money in, and I was like, I gotta quit my job because there's too much to do. Like we have access. We had the one thing that we needed to do all these things we wanted to do, which was money, and now I just need time. So the only thing to do was to quit my day job.
Was that also one of the requirements from the people writing the checks? Was like, hey, like we'll write you a check, but you got to go all in on this.
No.
You just knew that you needed to connect the dots and reach a certain point. So that makes sense. So now we're in 2 years after that. We're in 2022 roughly.
Hmm.
That when you officially leave the golf club, which I swear it has to be the year that you and I cross paths, because it has to be more than 3 years. It just doesn't make
Yeah,
sense that it's shorter than that.
I can
So,
tell you the exact moment, Travis.
all right, you're gonna need to refresh my memory on where it was. It had to be
Yeah,
FSGA. Oh, it was
yeah.
was it the airport?
No.
Well, okay, but that's why I remember having the first long conversation with you is we're both waiting on our flights to leave at the airport. But
And you had blown out your knee.
yes, I mean that can be any year. Something's always happening. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
that's not
always
a timestamp.
which injury are you referring to? But
Yeah.
go ahead, refresh my memory exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at this point, it is November 2021, and quit my job. We had a decent amount of investment money in. Wasn't paying myself a salary, but we had money to do things with the app. We had launched the product, and we were in that phase of trying to figure out like, hey, what do our users want us to build next? And so we were just coming up with different games that we could build for our users. We had the fantasy betting game, and we wanted to think about, okay, like what games do we want to build next? What games can we operate as a regulated DFS operator in, can get a legal opinion for? Um, and so we created a live in-game, oh, more than, less than thing called Survival. And we had created the survival game and we were looking to get feedback on it. Fast forward to summer 2022, June, and we're in Detroit. And we go up to me and Sahil, and say, "Hey, that's Travis. Like he's been around here for a while. We should talk to this guy. He's a good guy to know." And so we showed you the game, we showed you the app, and then that was the moment where like you gave us such great feedback, and I was like, "Oh, this guy's just a great person to have in the vortex." And so that's kind of where it all started.
So I definitely recall that, but I think that was the airport moment because it was us both flying out of Detroit from FSGA, the summer conference there, where
It wasn't because I drove. That was in Vegas when we were at the airport.
so this Detroit so Vegas the following year. Man,
Vegas the following G2E. Yep.
I'm trying to keep track of all this stuff because I feel like I've known you for 10 years. And so my brain is like, there's no way it just happened in like 2022 or 2021
Yeah, man.
summer month. But man,
Yeah.
I'm recalibrating my entire timeline that is the Will Trevis friendship. So now back to your timeline. We're now in 2022.
Mhm.
You're full time working on Better Fantasy. People are writing you
Yeah.
checks. You're creating
Yeah.
different game variations, whatever the users want, or whatever you know that they're gonna want, and shipping it to them. Are there any roadblocks that happen from this point to maybe for like the next 12 months going to like the end of 2023? Is there anything else that happens that's big in the Better Fantasy timeline?
I wouldn't say so, honestly. Like our existence as Better Fantasy was mostly one of just trying to tread water. We were raising money and we had fixed monthly costs as an operator. And most of our time was honestly just spent trying to raise money because at this point, um, we were sort of at a chicken or the egg moment where we didn't have the revenue to warrant a big raise, and we didn't have the capital to get us to big revenue. So it was sort of like that in between of, you know, we can't really do much, but we have this really great thing that is a unique DFS experience, but we just didn't have a great distribution system to go out and get the people required to grow it out.
So how did we dot the i's and cross the t's from this double-edged sword scenario of needing more revenue to have a bigger raise, not having enough to get to that bigger revenue? So what was the tipping point on either side of that scale?
Yeah, the tipping point on either side of that scale was being introduced to Fantasy Spin. Because we had always done a really good job as Better Fantasy of um, managing capital, extending runway while still growing the platform and building a better product. And we were at a point where we needed an influx of money to really grow the thing. And we just weren't able to raise institutional money, you know, for whatever reason. And so we were lucky enough to be introduced to Fantasy Spin, who was a free-to-play app at the time that was looking to get into the regulated DFS environment. And we had all of that set up. We had all of our DFS vendors integrated, all of our compliance things integrated, and that's what they didn't have. And so they acquired us in October of 2023 in order to build their game into our platform. That's kind of how it went down.
So now we are roughly 25, 26 months in post acquisition. Fantasy Spin is now not solely free to play because they've had all of your, all the, like you said, the vendors, the licensing, all the compliance stuff in place. What has been the biggest? I think the word I'm looking for is like where you look back and starting from the Better Fantasy Excel sheet, you talking to Sahil
Hmm.
in the driveway of where you're at in Cleveland, Ohio, and to now essentially, what's been like the biggest like one of those things where you just think about this specific timeline, this path, and you're just like, man, like this like I like maybe like an I did it or like just a self accomplishment. Like what happened? Was it the acquisition where you sat back, you're like, we did it, or was it something that happened post acquisition that sprung that mindset along?
It's a deep question, man.
So like
Part of,
I saved those for
yeah,
the end, catch
no,
you
you're
off
good.
guard.
No, I love it. Part of uh part of me says like we haven't done anything yet, because we're still um at a point where we have a lot of goals that we want to hit. And I don't want to get complacent and say like, oh, done, you know,
Right.
like you know it as well as I do. What separates us as founders is our persistence, and our genuine desire to push the rock when you don't want to push the rock anymore, and that comes from various places, whether it's passion for what you're doing, or in my case, it was economic, like I had to make this work because I'd quit my job. You know what I mean? Like there's various factors into why you stay persistent. And I think having an attitude of like, we haven't done effing anything yet keeps me hungry. And so I don't have that feeling quite yet.
I like how you said effing twice. The 7-year-old viewers have tuned back in to,
Well, my
to,
mom might listen.
to the show. So how much of the success of Better Fantasy, now Fantasy Spin, do you attribute to your knack for marketing and advertising from your time in that realm? Like, do you? I guess that's I don't have to add on to that, but how much do you attribute to that skill set?
It's a great question. I think how much do I attribute it to it? Well, I would say not a lot, if I'm being honest. Like the skill set of marketing, um, of understanding who your target audience is, what message is going to be most applicable for them, and figuring out the right channels to get that message to those people, and then tracking the results to see how it did, and then iterating on it. Like that's certainly useful. Um, but I would say what's more useful, and you could probably comment to this as well, is like the skill set of problem solving when there's no recipe book, or of going and starting something at zero and turning it into something tangible. Like there's no real like there's a playbook for marketing, you know. Um, but when you're starting something, you're figuring it out for yourself. And if you're a first-time founder, you're figuring it all out for the first time. So I would say my experiences in marketing were certainly helpful from the perspective of understanding the basics of how to acquire customers. Obviously, very helpful. But what was more helpful or beneficial was specifically working with the people that I worked with, both at McWhorter Driscoll and at Red Peg and at Canterbury, and at the metal recovery business, and seeing what kind of skills outside of like direct business functions these people had in common that were successful. And so I think like I learned more about how to listen, how to prioritize, things like that were lessons I took from those gigs that were more beneficial than marketing 101. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, throwing yourself into the fire is what I always call it as is the learning as you go. And I know you mentioned like there's no recipe book, which kind of is a weird pun intended segue to my next question of if we're looking in the future, and I don't think I've ever asked this question in any of the episodes I've done so far because it's usually just learning about the timeline from first inception of I want to do this when I grow up to where you are right now in 2025.
Mhm.
But I am curious though. So once, let's just say Fantasy Spin gets acquired and you get bought out, where you're no longer there's no earn out or you're not part of the team anymore.
Mhm.
Do you have any interest in tapping into that pre uh, concept of anything culinary related? Like, do you think that hey, I did all this stuff now? It makes sense that I can go back and I can scratch that itch. Maybe I do look into co-owning a restaurant or doing something like this. Do you think there's ever a path back to that initial idea?
For sure. No question. One of the things I've started to do informally and may start doing more formally, um, is making pancakes and passing them out to um, folks on the street who need them. So that's like we have a lot of folks in here in the Raleigh-Durham area who unfortunately, like for whatever reason, have to be out on the intersection and, ask for things. And one of the things I like to do is make pancakes, and I'm really freaking good at it, dude. It's probably the thing that I'm best in the world at. Like the thing that I'm the best at is probably making pancakes. And so I've been doing that and like putting them in little containers and passing them out. So like that's something that I could see being becoming a more formal venture.
I like that pancakes are I don't know. I feel like I can go on a 20 question run about about this, not just
Go
about
off.
the pancake idea, but just I don't know. I feel like that's such a a fun, interesting thing. Not, I mean, of course, doing it to help those less fortunate, but just the fact that like like you crush pancakes. That's something like I don't know. I don't know. It just was something that was fun to listen to. I guess it's fun to hear you say that. So it sounds like for people that are still watching and tuning in, that Will and I are going to be opening up a restaurant, pancake oriented, sometime in the next 10 years. So make sure you guys keep your peepers popped for that. But we've essentially caught up to now 2025. So the question I always like to wrap things up on is going back through the entirety history of the life that is Will. There are a lot of things that you have made choices wise. There's a lot of things that have happened outside your control. We like to call these butterfly effects. If you were going to attribute one individual butterfly effect that helped you get to where you are today, which one out of all the many, whether it was in or out of your control, would that be?
Definitely my situation growing up. My parenting situation was absolutely perfect. I have a great mom and a great dad, and that was definitely the most impactful thing. Like in terms of setting me up for who I am, which is, I think I have a really good perspective on the world and try not to take things too seriously that I can't control and take the things I can control very seriously that are important. Um, so I think that's probably the number one thing. Just growing up in a good house. Very lucky to have that.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode. I do appreciate you hopping on here, Will, and sharing your story
Yeah,
with
it's
us.
fun.
Like I said, keep your peepers popped for that pancake shop. It's coming. Within 10 years, it'll be
Yeah.
live.
I mean, don't be surprised. Like this is the kind of thing where, I'm starting to get older now, and I'm starting to realize that what you work on is one of the most important decisions you make. And helping people is something I'm very passionate about. Cooking is something I'm very passionate about. And so I don't think it's too crazy to set that at like maybe a plus 300 odds right now. I would say me setting up some sort of cooking operation formally under a legal entity, I would set at plus 300.
Plus 300 because you're still at fantasy spin, or regardless of what you're doing outside of that plus 300?
Yeah, in the next 10 years, I would set it at plus 300.
Fair, fair. I would probably take those odds. So yeah. Again, thanks for joining sharing your story with us, joining with us here today. If you guys are interested in learning more or reaching simply out to Will, you can send him a request connection on LinkedIn. That's why you have his name underneath his face. If you're watching this on YouTube, regardless of where you're watching this or listening to this to, go ahead and subscribe. There's a plenty of episodes prior to this one, and there's going to be plenty more afterwards. But yeah, Will, thanks for stopping in and sharing with us here.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, guys, enjoy the next episodes, and we'll see you on the next one.